If there's a murder investigation, the body will go to the medical examiner's office because they're the ones who are going to be testing for toxicology. But any physical evidence, whether it's bullets, their clothing, things like that all comes to the lab to be tested. Okay, so I do have a disclaimer that I do work for the NYPD, but I'm not speaking on their behalf. I'm only speaking of my education and experience as a forensic scientist. Okay, so what people think when I say I'm in forensics? You mean like CSI, which is literally what everyone asks me, and is forensic science like what you see on TV? The simple answer is no, because not everything can be so scrunched into a 30-minute or hour of a TV show. Obviously, it's just like a much longer process, and you're not really seeing so much of like the lab work and stuff like that. Okay, so my undergrad was basically some of the courses that I took were forensic photography, crime scene investigation, lab instrumentation, moot court, criminal justice, toxicology. And then while I was, I think it's in one of the later slides, but I went to University of Baltimore. And while I was there, I had an internship with the Maryland State Police. And I interned in their question documents unit. And then after college, I actually worked for them in their Firearms and Toolmarks Unit. Okay, so the police lab, let me just make sure I'm not. Okay, so there was one slide I think we missed. I think it's slide number 6.
Do you want me to go back?
If you don't mind.
Am I going forward?
I think you're going forward.
There we go.
Back one more, back one more. There we go.
Back,
okay.
Right there?
Yeah. Okay, so this is how I got into it and my training and education. So I took a forensic science course in high school. I don't know if that's offered at BT, but either way, that just kind of gave me a background of, you know, what a career in forensics might look like. What you would need is a bachelor's degree in any science. It doesn't have to be forensic science, but obviously forensic science is preferable. You don't need your master's, but it's also preferable. And then as far as my education, I went to University of Baltimore, as I said, and I got my degree in forensic science. And the reason that I went to University of Baltimore is because they are one of the few schools that actually offers the forensic science program. And what they have as their program is it's a 2-year program, and it's in your junior and senior year. But during your freshman and sophomore year is when you're taking all of the science courses. Like, they want you to get that out of the way before you enter the forensics program. So those are just solely forensic science based classes. So in your freshman and sophomore years, you are taking Chem 1, Chem 2, Physics 1, Physics 2, Orgo 1, Orgo 2, and Bio, and then any of your gen eds. But I think that I wanted to state that it is very important for you to get internships, just like build your resume and to get that experience. And also, like, not only for your resume, but if you aren't sure what you want to do, it's not like you can, you know, if you don't have a class or you aren't looking things up online, like, you're only going to get to see what a day-to-day is if you go and intern. And, like, you know, you can, I'm sure you can go for like tours of any crime labs, things like that, just to get an idea. Okay, so we went through that one. I think the next. Okay, so this is for the NYPD police lab, there are many different sections. Like the lab has 5 floors, and like each floor has a different like section analyzing different types of evidence. So there's controlled substances, firearms and microscopy, latent print development unit, evidence control unit, quality assurance, and then criminalistics basically has all of like these smaller subcategories, which are chemistry, hair and fibers, explosives, fire debris, DNA, glass, question documents, and photo impressions. Okay, so just to back up, I've been working there at the police lab for about 6 years now. I started off in the controlled substance analysis section, and I was there for the past 5.5 years, almost 6. And then I recently switched into the firearms section. So, but I haven't started with my training there. So I figured I would take you through a day in the life of working in the controlled substance analysis section, just because I have much more background and information for that. So my primary responsibility basically within that section is to analyze potential controlled substances to determine the presence or absence of controlled substances. So like we would get different, it could be different types of evidence. It could be solid material. It could be liquids. It could be rock-like, just different types. And then we're basically testing that to see if it's a controlled substance or not by using the lab instrumentation. So I figured I would take you through a day-to-day. Basically, the first thing that I would do when I got to work is I would go to my lab bench, and basically I would verify the balances or the scales that I'm going to be using, and the reagents that I'm going to be using for the day for my tests. And then I would clean my lab bench and make sure that any like tools, anything I'm using are clean for use. And I also try and use any disposable tools when I can. Then what I'll do is once that's all set up, I then go to the evidence control section, which basically is made up of uniformed personnel. It's all officers. And basically they're the ones who do intake. So when officers will come to drop off evidence that they've confiscated, they drop it off, and then it's vouchered into the evidence control section. And then the analysts will go pick up cases from there. So I would go pick up my cases for the day. Usually I was analyzing about 5 to 6 cases a day. And then those would be transferred into my custody. And then I bring those back to my lab bench. And I would basically start, I do one case at a time. I would first open up the evidence, like it's usually in an outer container. I open that up, and then I take inventory. I basically make sure that what is in front of me is what's listed on the invoice to make sure everything matches up. Then I will take a weight of the substance. So let's say I get a Ziploc bag of a like white powder. So because different substances have different weight charges, I have to take a weight. So I take a weight as my first thing before I even do any testing, before I'm taking out material to test, to do color test, anything like that. I'm going to take a weight, and then I'm going to record that. I basically have a worksheet out as I'm going through my analysis to like write everything down contemporaneously. So I'll record the weight, and then I begin with the color tests. And then the color tests are presumptive tests. So those are only going to tell me what it could possibly be, but because they're not confirmatory, it's only telling me like how to guide me in my analysis and telling me how to prepare my sample for the next step of analysis. So I do the color tests, then I know how to prepare my sample, and then I will prepare the sample for GCMS. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar. with gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, but that's the instrument that we mostly use as our confirmatory test. So I run my sample with a negative control, and basically what that does is the negative control basically has everything that I've put in, like the solvent, I label it the same, everything that's in my sample vial aside from the actual sample. So basically I'm able to run that before, and then if anything shows up in that one, I know that I would have to start again, because it's possible that like something would like got in there, but there should be nothing, and then something may or may not be in my sample. So once I run that on the GCMS, I then get my results. I then write up my report with my findings, and then that report, once I sign it, is then reviewed by a quality control analyst who reviews it again, and then they're the ones who officially will say whether or not it's approved. Once it's approved, it then gets sent to the assigned district attorney, who's assigned to the case. And then depending on the case, it may go to trial, and then I may have to testify as an expert witness. So, okay, also as a sidebar, I in my 5.5 years, I've analyzed over 1,700 cases. NYPD has analyzes the most cases. Like their controlled substance analysis section is definitely like the biggest section of the lab, but they analyze cases, like more cases than any other lab within the US, if not the whole world, which is how I was able to get so much experience within those few years. Okay, and then common tools and instruments. We use, as I mentioned, balances, GCMS, which is gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, which we use for qualitative analysis, which will basically tell you what the substance is. And then there's also GCFIDMS, which is gas chromatography. I don't know why I'm blanking on this, but this basically will tell you how much of a substance. So what we usually use, GCFIDMS is for cocaine and for heroin, because that we can basically tell the percentage of cocaine or heroin within that sample. So like, for example, if there is a bag of possible cocaine, I test it and I see that like cocaine shows up, let's say just with GCMS, because it's qualitative. So it'll tell you that there's cocaine, it'll tell you what else is in that, whether there's other things that they use to dilute it. If there is a request to do quantitative analysis, then basically we would be telling how much of that whole bag has cocaine in it. So just a percentage. Then we also use FTIR, which is Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy. And then, as I mentioned, there's various color tests, but we only use that as presumptive. So as I mentioned, based off of whether or not the case goes to trial, and if they want the analyst to testify, like you may have to be called to court to testify as an expert witness to your analysis. So like I've testified 10 times in city courts and in federal courts. And there's basically 3 different parts of the testimony. So the first thing is, I'm sure as you guys have seen, it's called voir dire, but that's basically where you're deemed an expert. So like I get up on the stand, they like make you raise your right hand, and you basically state, like they say, do you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth? And then you say, I do. Then voir dire is basically where the ADA will go through all of your educational and experience background. And then they basically will turn to the judge and say, I wish to deem, Ms. Chapman as an expert witness. And then the judge, based off of your experience and everything, can basically say yes or no. So the difference, though, with expert witness testimony is that as an expert witness, you are able to testify to your opinion, which is very different. Then after voir dire, after you've been deemed an expert, they go through direct examination, which is where the ADA will ask you questions about your analysis. You go through every step, as I said before, like with what you do at the lab and everything like that, and how you came to your conclusions. Then there's cross-examination, and cross-examination is where the defense attorney will then have a chance to cross-examine you and basically question you on anything that you've said so far, anything about your analysis. And then once you're done with cross, like that's it. You don't really stay in court and like you leave after you testify, just because like you're supposed to be biased, and whatever happens like as the outcome like shouldn't have any effect or bearing on you. Like I just go in, I'm testifying to my analysis, and that's it. Like, okay. So what if science isn't your thing? There are other options. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with any of these, but I listed these. There's, if you're interested in math or accounting, like there's forensic accounting. All these things have a forensic like kind of like thing to them, but they're not fully like in a lab or things like that. Forensic psychology is something that where you are a psychologist, but you may be going to prisons to speak with inmates, and you're kind of like to see maybe like their mental state or things like that. So it's not fully forensics, but like still has some sort of, so you do have options. And as I said, as far as like experience, like you should take science courses that have labs, maybe get like internships, whether or not it's in a lab or not, but definitely to get your experience and see from there. Okay, thank you for listening. Does anyone have any questions?
I have 2 questions.
Okay.
First, I wanted to say thank you. Your presentation was amazing.
Thank you.
Is it okay with you if I ask my 2 questions at once and then you can like answer them after?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so my first question is like, I know you explained it a little bit in your like common tools and instruments slide, but like what exactly like is testing, or like how do you go about that? And then my second question is it a primarily like work on your own type of job, or like do you find yourself working with other people as well?
Okay, so great questions. I'll start off with your second question. Basically, so within controlled substances, let's say there are different teams. I don't know how every lab is set up, but I just know from like my experience, there are different teams within controlled substances. So there is a team that analyzes only tablets and capsules. There's a team that analyzes like bulk cases, so like only like huge bags of things. There's a team that analyzes like if there's only one unit, so like just like one bag or things like that. There's ones that analyze like multiple, so there could be like hundreds of like small bags. And each one of those teams has a supervisor. So you are directly under a supervisor, and you are working on your own, but the supervisor is obviously always there if there's questions, if you know they're managing your caseload to make sure that like you are not overwhelmed, or you know are at a good pace, or you know if like you need anything, like there is a supervisor for you. And then your first question, which was as far as like the like lab, remind me your question in the beginning one.
Okay, yeah. So like how, like what exactly is testing? Like I know you can test like different things, but like how I don't even know like how to ask it. Like, not how do you go about it, but like what things do you like look for that kind of answer what you're testing, or if that makes
Okay. Yeah. So basically, I'm sure that every lab has some type of like scheme of analysis, where like I was taught that you basically are looking at the substance, like what it is, you're seeing whether or not it's a powder, if it's a liquid, if it's a tablet, like there's different, like you go through a different route of analysis depending on the type of evidence. So for the example that I gave with like a powder, so your first thing is always to do a weight, always, like whether or not it's a liquid, whether or not it's tablets, you're always taking a weight, because there are different, like every substance, like cocaine, for example, has a different, like different weight charges than heroin. So like that could potentially mean that like if the defendant had like a large amount of like maybe the same amount of cocaine as they had for heroin, could mean that like there's a difference in like, I don't know as far as like time done, but like it could mean that there's 2 years versus 3 years, like depending on things like that, like weight, because you are definitely going to become more familiar with the law as far as controlled substances. And basically, you have your scheme of analysis. So like it's easy to be on your own because you have that and you have the standard operating procedure to like fall back on if like you don't know what to do. But you take the weight, you then go to your color test, and then based off of your color test, it's okay, how am I preparing it for the next step? So like based off of each result, you know now that once you have analyzed it with your confirmatory test, like did I get conclusive results? Did I not? And then like you know where to go from there. Like everything is very step by step. It's not like you need your supervisor there like every step of the way to be like, what do I do next? What do I do next? I hope that answered it.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Hi, Talia.
Hi. How has like Corona changed what you do like from day to day?
Okay, great question. Okay, so as you know, it's very hard to, like, there's no lab in my apartment, so it's not like I can like be bringing evidence home or anything like that. Like really, if you're not at the lab, like it's not like work can like, you can go home with it. So I have had to go in since Corona started. I think they were like trying to do a work from home, which was basically reviewing like people's reports from home. But other than that, like I've had to go in. I went in even on Monday with like the big storm. I was like, why am I going in? But it makes sense. I mean, it's a 24-hour operation. The lab is always open. Like even if it's not analysts that are there, like it is always open for intake, for whatever it is, just because like it's not like because of Corona or anything that like crime stops. Like it is always there. Okay, anyone else?
I have a question. What's the job market like in the near future for what you do?
Great question also. So because of everything going on with the police and everything, a lot of officers have retired. In terms of like analysis, obviously with like marijuana becoming legalized, like our procedures are always changing, obviously with the law. But yeah, I mean, firearms used to only be uniform personnel. It was only officers that were working in firearms. Like day one that I started, I always wanted to do firearms. It was just something that I was like super interested in. But everyone starts off in controlled substances, and then as opportunities arise, like you can then apply to the different sections. Firearms was never an option, but only because all of these officers have now retired. Now they had like a huge backlog. They were like, all right, now we'll like open it up to civilians. So like that was why I got the job. So like I'm happy about that. But I don't know as far as like other labs or anything else as far as like how they're going forward with things.
All right. And then I was curious, what is like the coolest cutting edge technology that maybe you don't even have now, but people talk about it coming down the road?
Sorry, repeat that one thing.
So what is the new technology that people in your lab are talking about that may come in, the next, let's say 10 or 15 years that will maybe revolutionize your industry? Is there something out there that people talk about?
There is an instrument that was introduced at the lab. I think they were going through like a few like test runs with it. I don't know why I'm blanking on the name. It may come to me, but it's basically this instrument that even if it's through plastic or it's in a container, you basically will use this instrument. It's like a handheld, and you put it like over whatever it is that you're testing, and it for like, let's say 5 seconds, and for some reason it is able to tell you what's in there. Like, I don't know how it's been proven, like, but that would definitely cut a lot of our testing out. Once it's approved, like everything obviously at the lab has to be, it goes through like a lot of tests, a lot of like everything before it's actually implemented for use. So that could be one of the things.
Great. We have time for one more question. Does anyone out there have a question? Okay, so we've got a very cool request, I think, and I don't know if you have any time, but when
Wait, I did see Sydney's hand go up.
Oh, go ahead. Okay, great.
Yeah, I just had one question. I don't know, like, this might come off as a little bit silly, whatever. I like watch a lot of crime shows.
Yeah.
Just like, obviously nothing similar to what it's really like, but do you ever find yourself like wrapped up in a crime, like drawn in from, like, I know on crime shows sometimes they show like someone who works like after the crime, not like the detectives or the police, like getting caught up in those crimes. Just like, has that ever happened to anyone you know, or like in your office?
Wrapped up meaning like they're involved?
Like not like they got themselves involved, like somehow like they got drawn in by like a criminal who knows they're working on their case or something like that.
So, thank God, no, not that I know of. And yeah, I hope not. Nothing that I've heard, but obviously everything is possible. I definitely do get scared as far as like testifying. I'm like, oh my gosh, please don't look at me. Like, I get so nervous because like you're literally sitting in front of the defendant. I'm like, I don't, whatever happens to you, like, it doesn't matter to me. Like, I hope maybe you'll get off. I don't know. But like, yeah, I feel like that's your whole, like, if you are scared about that, like that is something that like you can tell yourself. It's just that like you are unbiased, you are testifying, you are analyzing this case. It's about the science. You got this thing in your custody. You have no idea who the defendant is. Like, you have no connection to them, and you're literally just testing this substance to see what it is. And you're saying what it is. Whatever the lawyer and everyone wants to do as far as the defendant and where they're going, like, that's up to them. But like, you are stating the science, and that's it. Like, yeah, but I have not heard anything. Hopefully I never do.
All right. Well, so we've got an interesting request. Members of our mock trial team request maybe a little time after the Zoom to ask you some questions, probably regarding one of their cases that they're taking on. So thanks, students. You guys were great. Let's give Ms. Chapman a virtual clap and say thank you. And so everyone's free to go, and mock trial folks or anyone else for that matter, if you want to stick around, you're welcome to do so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Before the mock trial goes, I have one more question. I'm sorry. But
That's okay.
So you had talked about it a little bit before, that like there are different like teams for certain stuff, but like do you work with other people when you're like in the zone? Like do you like test stuff with other people, or like are you in the lab alone doing stuff alone, or like are you working with the team members?
Okay, so when I say team, it's just that we're all analyzing the same type of evidence. So like when we go pick up cases from evidence control, it means, okay, I'm on this team. Like I analyze only, tablets and capsules. Can I have, 4 cases that are tablets and capsules? And that means that somebody else from my team is also going to pick up the same thing. We're usually all in like the lab, but like we have lab benches that are all right near each other, obviously in case we have questions and things like that. But we're not like analyzing together, just because like that probably wouldn't be a good idea as far as chain of custody and things like that, because then that would mean that if that did go to trial, like anyone who was involved in this has to go. But obviously like they're there for any questions, so it's your supervisor. But yeah, you're pretty much doing the work on your own.
Okay, thank you.
You're trained. There's also like a big train. Like I didn't mention this, but like I was in a training for 8 months. So like they train you like for, like I've seen every single drug possible. You know how to test everything. And then there's also mock trial. So like you also are prepared for court.
So is that training that you just mentioned like in college, or is it once you like get a job in the field?
So college definitely, like if you do a forensic science program, they do have like moot court. They have like, those different classes that'll prep you, but it's only once you start a job in a lab that because every lab is going to have a different like standard operating procedure. So you're going to need to know like what their specific one is. Like if I were to switch jobs and go somewhere else, like they're not going to be doing the same thing that NYPD does. So like I'm going to have to learn their standard operating procedure, probably have to go through their training, and then that's it. So it'll be at the lab, like once you get a job, that you learn from there.
Okay. Thank you so much. It was really great.
No problem.
Okay, bye. Thank you, Mr. Monroe.
You're welcome, Brady.
Thank you
jump
very
off
much.
Ayala, but just wanted to say nice job and bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Say hi to the
Alright.
brothers for me. I'm sure you'll talk to them.
Will do.
But, I'm sure, yeah, they're all going to grill you now. Okay, bye.
Oh, obviously.
Thank you so much for coming, Ayala. That was fantastic.
No problem. Thank you, Eliana.
We have most of our mock trial team here. We have, I think, 3 expert witnesses and just some regular witnesses who would love to get some insight as to how best to testify and be convincing in court.
Okay. I'm wondering if we could actually, because I can definitely go into this more with you guys. I just do have to go in like a few minutes. But okay, I wonder if I can like send you guys like kind of prep things that like they've given to us as far as like, I don't know, how does your mock trial, like how does it work? And yeah.
Here, Alma, you want to go? Alma and Ari are 2 captains if one of them wants to speak. And if you don't have time, that's fine, but we have the rest of the afternoon, so take how much you have.
We have all the time in the world.
Well, basically, usually there's 2 experts, but this year we have 3. So we usually have 3 witnesses on each side, and this year's a criminal case. So we have like a detective and we have 2 like telecommunicators, and it's a robbery. So we just thought it was interesting because we have more experts than usual this year. And, we want to be able to, kind of be able to explain the testimony better, because one of our experts actually like offers DNA. And like, I think, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but kind of more forensic evidence also. So we just thought maybe if you could help with, how we both like entering in as an expert, like how the expert should sound and like laying like groundwork, but also with the testimony itself, because some of the testimony is a little confusing. So, being as clear as possible.
Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. It definitely sounds like this will prep you a lot. Because I did not have anything like this. Like even my course in college was just like kind of basics of like, okay, this is what happens. Not like you actually like setting it all up. But do you guys have like pre-trial? Is that something that like you guys have incorporated in here? Okay, so like what I do is like if I'm assigned to a case, I will speak to the ADA who's assigned to the case. I basically speak with them like, hey, like, can we do pre-trial before, you know, I go on the stand? They're usually okay with that. You meet with them and you're like, sometimes you can, sometimes not, like depends on the ADA, but whether or not they'll allow for you to like give them a sheet of questions for that, like to ask, just because then it's things that like, you know, you're going to get asked, like your educational experience. Can you tell me about your training? Like things like that, but like by this point, like I've testified 10 times. So like, I already know the spiel. And it's very helpful because voir dire and like that first part really is like where you're deemed an expert. And that's the stuff that like you better know like really well. So just by having that practice and just like keep running through it, like that's very helpful. But then giving them your like questions as far as like, it breaks up your analysis. It breaks up like, hey, okay, so like what date did you get this evidence? When did you start your analysis? Like run through like what you did, you know, just like with different things as far as your analysis, and like you can just like break it up like that. Like you give them kind of like, okay, ask me this and ask me this, whatever. And then this way, really voir dire is like, you know, done. You do direct, and it's basically like what you know you're answering about your analysis. And then like as far as like cross-examination, especially for someone like who's testifying to like forensically like to their analysis, the things that cross-examination, like the defense attorneys will ask you, are basically the only things, like they can't question science. Like science is science, and like it's hard fact, they can't question it. So like they'll try, and then you're like, no, like you just, you know, you obviously have to be respectful. But the main things that they'll try and get you on are contamination. Like somehow this was contaminated, like you did something, someone put, you know, you walked away and someone put cocaine in there, and now, you know, like they'll try and get you on that. But that's, I don't know if like all of you were in my presentation before, but like that's why we have negative controls. Okay, I know that I'm running a negative control before my sample. I know that if anything is in there, then I'm gonna run it again. Like there should not be anything in your negative control. And then your sample, like that shows you that like I took precautions, it's not contaminated. And then like you do take all of these precautions, and you go through all those steps of like, okay, like I know it's not contaminated. And then the other thing that they'll try and get you on is chain of custody. How do I know that this was your custody the entire time? Like there's no way you didn't leave, you didn't go to the bathroom, you didn't, you know, like they'll try and be like, okay, it was out of your custody, and that's when someone put something in there, or like that's how. And the main thing with that is just that it is in my custody at all times. If it's leaving my custody, you know, it's scanned electronically to whoever it's being scanned to. And I will also like overnight, I don't know what procedures are at other labs, things like that, but all of my evidence, I have like a lockbox with like an individual lock code that only I know. And then that lockbox gets put into a cabinet, which has another lock on it that only I know. So like it's double locked, and it's like kept in both overnight, but then like the actual box can be on my lab bench for like during the day. And then I lock it if I'm going on break, if I'm going to the bathroom, things like that. So like I know that it was like only open when I was there. Alexis?
Hi, I just had a question. If you've ever had a problem testifying as an unbiased witness, if you were testifying to your own work, because that's something we're kind of running into this year. I was wondering if you've had any experience with that.
Sorry, repeat it. It's like if you're
testifying to your own work, like let's say you're testifying to like your procedure, but you can't really be unbiased if you're testifying to your own work. If that makes sense.
So it's more that I'm unbiased in relation to the defendant.
Right.
So like right? So like my evidence, like, yeah, it's my case. Like it was a case that was assigned to me. Whatever, you know, like happens with the evidence, whatever, you know, like how I test it, what my conclusions are, like that's the science, and that's the
Right.
like I'm just following lab procedure. That's all I was doing, and like, you know, there's no that's
definitely
my job,
helpful.
you know.
We can emphasize that for sure.
Yeah.
No.
I know I have questions, but like I really do have to go. But Eliav, I totally like I do want to like answer all of your questions. I can try and find those slides for you guys, just so hopefully that helps, just like with everything. And like obviously if there's any more questions, Eliav can give you my email. But yeah, I hope that whatever I said so far is helpful.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for staying on later. We didn't run too far into overtime.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, hope I'll speak with you guys soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
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 So much.